Okay, thank you everybody for joining us today. We will have a little session about REST API's roadmap and developer portal roadmap. And for that, we have our own Mark O'Neill, so he can jump in and give us all the good information about this. Please go ahead, Mark.
Hey everyone. First off, just a vocal. Davey, my audio coming through okay there?
Yes, sir, it is.
And can you see the deck?
Yes, sir, I can see it.
All righty. So since I am going to be watching the deck, I won't be monitoring the chat. So let's go. You can go ahead and put your conversation or questions in the chat. And when we're all done with the presentation and I stop sharing, we can kind of just go through and have a general discussion. Does that sound fair, folks? I don't hear any dissent, so let's carry on. So since this is a roadmap session, we have our safe harbor forward-looking statement here. We'll definitely be talking about things that we're planning on working on in the future, and as can often happen, our plans may change. And so we'll just keep an eye on progress and when things are delivered in test and staging. So it's been a very interesting and fun year from a public API perspective. We made some great progress around releasing our rubrics endpoints. And Jeffrey, I think that is who was making the comments about EAC. Communication with them says that they're good to go. They just need to actually start to refactor their code to include and work with the new rubric APIs that we are releasing previously as well as over the coming releases. Okay. Uh, New stuff that is work in progress or soon to be work in progress that we plan on releasing in the October to December timeframe is we've got quite a few really good items here that I think not only meet our B2 end of life goals, but also some long-standing client requests, notably making finding things in the gradebook a little bit easier. So we'll be adding dates to results and searches. So you'll actually be able to search gradebook and columns for time boxed information. Okay, much in the same way that you use the current created date or created compare or modify compare with the other endpoints. We are including a copy from identifier in the course response data. So you'll know when a what the originating course was if it is a copied course. Quite handy if you're triaging and following a chain of copy operations, etc. We'll be adding context and resource history to our LTI implementation. And, this really is very specifically an LTI enhancement that actually provides, if you will, a history of that implementation to the developers. Calendars, as for anyone who's worked with our calendar APIs, you know that they are very 3LO, three-legged OAuth specific. You can only work with the gradebook as a specific user. So Davey can work with the gradebook APIs. I can work with the gradebook APIs on our individual calendars. What we previously could not do is enable a system level um, use of the calendar APIs. Say you have a calendar service on campus that you wish to use to push course calendar events or system-wide calendar events, etc. We are removing the 3LO constraint. You'll still be able to utilize 3LO, but we will be applying the same air quote REST user end quote capabilities to calendar, which will be a totally which will give you the ability to use the calendar endpoints purely on that privileges level, like you can do with other APIs. We're also going to be introducing there. We realized that there was a gap with our institutional hierarchy endpoints, and that very specifically was the ability to manage child nodes. You could add child nodes, right? You could know what their parents were, and parents couldn't, you could get a list of the child nodes, but what you could not do via the APIs is satisfy an oopsie moment, if you will, where you added a child to the wrong parent node, right? You couldn't use the API to undo that. And so we'll be adding the capability to actually change a child's node's parent. Quite handy moving forward. We definitely have a body of work on the docket for this fall around course content, very specifically implementing and filling resource handler gaps, right? One that's called out quite frequently is blank page, but we also have tool links, etc. And the goal of the work is to actually be able to support the breadth of resource handlers that are available to content objects. We'll see how that goes based on the work has not been scoped completely yet, and we may end up handling only a couple of those initially, but we're optimistic that we'll be able to cover several more. We also want to add secondary IDs to the user object, right? Sometimes you might want to, we don't support requesting a user based on, say, first name and last name, or just last name, or users on just the last name, or we can't do a search on an email, for example, right? And so the idea is let's flesh out those secondary IDs a little bit to increase and meet additional use cases around querying for users and single user data. So what are we doing after December, right? Well, I don't have actual release dates around each of these, but we are going to move forward with in 2024 with working on original discussion APIs. Those of you maybe have who have worked with APIs or want to work with discussion APIs have found that they only are they're only usable in the ultra user experience. So we're going to release original discussion APIs to meet the other half of the need. We're also going to work on retrieving system level logs, things like the authentication log, the system log, etc. Those can, the goal is that those will be time boxed. So you'll be able to say, hey, I'm interested in, just the logs from yesterday. I'm interested in the logs from midnight yesterday to right now, etc. And the idea then is that you'll be able to take that information and feed it into any log analysis software that you have. We'll talk about longer tail stuff that's related to this in a couple of minutes. So we have, a good bit of work to do around the content collection, right? Very specifically, right now you can read content collection items. What you can't do is add items, create items, update them, or remove them. And so we'll be working on doing that. And then also one of the handy features that existed in a B2 format that's used by some folks is the ability to upload zip files of content and have those expanded. And so we'll be adding that capability as an endpoint as well. And then a huge one, right, that really want to work on, as if none of what I've already mentioned is fairly substantial, is assessment APIs. We'll start with being able to read assessment metadata, not only at the assessment level, but also at the question level, and be able to provide that. And then as we complete that work, we'll move forward with the create, update, and delete endpoints. And there's a substantial long list following that. Let's see, advance the slide. There we go. And the text is tiny because, well, that's just how it fit on the slide. And they're not in any prioritized order. They're just alphabetical. But just to kind of very quickly run through them, endpoints to manage activity stream content. We recognize that the attendance service and it's the APIs that are used to interact with it could use a little bit of love. So the idea is to spend a bit of time to refactor those APIs, and that will result in also having to likely do a version 2 of the service itself. Another big one that we've been hearing for a while is our batch API requests. And that's really, in a nutshell, the ability to submit like all of your course creates in a single request, right? That's largely a convenience method. If you submit 1,000 course creates, you're still going to consume 1,000 tokens out of your, and we'll talk about this in a moment, but out of your rate limit. But you'll be able to basically just build a list of course creates and submit those in a single request. Also, we want to provide the ability to manage course quotas, improve the searches on a few items, data sources and terms being two, and we want to work on group grading. Additionally, one of the pain points right now with the endpoints is that you can't have multiple search terms or search criteria, right? And so we want to take a step back, take a look at how we're handling searches and add the ability to provide multiple search criteria. Imagine the way you search for something in the UI currently, the ability to do something akin to that. OAuth tokens, right now there's revoking them and refreshing them is not an option. We'd like to be able to force refresh and ultimately revoke tokens going forward. We have a system endpoint currently that provides a functional level of information, notably version, etc. But also, we would like to deliver things like, what the disk quota is, what your database usage is, etc. I already mentioned terms. Another large one, as we are talking about, migrating to Ultra from original, we want to provide a set of endpoints that facilitate the course status, course alter status specifically, right? The ability to set the status on courses. Right now, that's a read-only line item in the course endpoints. And then we have a couple bodies of work around users endpoints. I mentioned adding secondary IDs already. Very specifically in this one, it's adding the user emails. And then additionally, increasing the search capabilities around those first name, last name identifiers, as well as adding the student ID to that list of secondary IDs. So, we have a good bit of work that, we not only are talking about delivering on, this year and in 2024, but we'll also be working on as in a best fit capacity, right, from a resourcing capacity, this longer list as well. I'm certain that some of this will fall over into 2025. So, related to the developer to APIs and API usage and the developer experience as a whole is the developer portal, right? We have completed a good bit of work already this last year. We've released the announcement panel. We've not made great use of it to date, but we do have that capability now. We also have enabled a LTI developer facing largely internal, but facing a feature for dynamic registration. And we've upgraded our Redis backend. So very little of the work that we have done recently is developer facing in the UI, right? That's really just the announcement panel. But that is going to change over the coming months. We are in the final phases of working on a change audit trail feature. This will become part of a larger reporting project, which I'll talk about in a moment. But the idea with the audit trail is that, hey, something's different about how my integration is functioning, etc. Maybe someone changed something. And so you'll be able to go in and you'll be able to identify who, if anyone, or any changes have been made in a period of time. And then quite possibly the feature I'm excited about all of these, but the feature that I'm most excited about, and we're getting close to being able to release this. We have some additional testing and we're running it in our internal staging developer portal, if you will, for it to really gather real world data around it. And that is our token bucket request limiting. That's a really huge change to our current rate limiting model. And I'll talk a bit about that in some detail here shortly. But after December, right, we have a list of exciting things that we're going to continue forward working on. I think a large one is an increase right now. If you want to know what your APIs or what your API usage is, you have to, the only way that you can investigate that is to inspect the X headers in non-OAuth requests responses, right? And then you have to take that data and plug it into maybe a round robin database, et cetera, so that you can chart your usage out. We are planning on, as part of that larger reporting project that I mentioned a couple moments ago, we're going to add the ability for you to go into a reporting section in the portal and be able to see what your API usage is. And you'll be able to drill down into that a bit, right? But the idea is that, you'll be able to see, okay, what's it been for the last 24 hours, the last week, the last month, and then an annual total based on everything from your total usage of all your applications to specific applications, giving you a greater level of visibility into what's going on with the applications that you've released. Uh, so currently, we use JWT as part of the LTI 1.3 specification. So we use JWT for LTI. That creates a bit of a problem for developers, because our REST APIs just use OAuth, right? We don't use OIDC. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to enable the use of JWT tokens in general, and that LTI token specifically for REST applications. And what that will mean is uh, uh, that LTI developers who actually are also using our REST APIs do not have to create an additional registration workflow in order to install their LTI application. You'll just install the LTI application using the ID provided, and Bob's your uncle. Now, there's a relationship here between the last item in this list, and I'll talk to that in a couple moments. So, and one other comment on the JWT. Initially, that would be an optional thing. As we are security conscious, eventually, I imagine that while we'll maintain backward compatibility, we will have a point where creating REST apps that don't use JWT will be deprecated, and you only be able to create REST apps that use JWT. So one of the issues or concerns that we constantly hear about from clients, right, is that vendors ask them to register their application for them. Now, that's a task that you all shouldn't be having to do. And so what we are going to do is investigate and hopefully come up with a solution that restricts what I'll call cross-domain application registration, right? So University of Arkansas has the domain, and unless they've been whitelisted to do so, registering an application that's actually being served from a non-University of Arkansas supported domain will not be possible, right? And when I talk registration, I very specifically am talking about a portal activity and not the deployment of the application in Learn. We also have been getting feedback around, vendors requesting that clients test their applications in their production environments. That really has always been a problem. I think for folks who have known me for a while, you test and test and you release production to production. And that's what this is about, right? To restrict the deployment of non-production applications. You'll still be able to deploy non-production applications to test and staging environments, or deploy production applications to test or staging or production, but no more non-production apps being able to be installed on production systems. And honestly, while you can't, guarantee that everyone pays their due diligence in testing and operations, you can hope that by the time someone has said, yes, I have a production app, that it isn't going to blow things up. For a while now, we've been talking about improving the API docs. I think at one session earlier this spring, I gave a quick demo of what we're thinking about doing. We kind of hit a snag with that, and we'll be revisiting that next year with the intent of actually rolling out an improved documentation model that, among other things, uh, fixes that annoying problem with copying and pasting endpoints. The new model actually supports that quite nicely, and I'm excited about being able to get this rolled out as well. Now, earlier I had mentioned when I was talking about a relationship between the JWT for REST apps and the deployment capabilities in Learn. Going to kick off a project that has its sole focus is to improve the integration and deployment for administrators. Okay, I have a slide on this in a couple minutes, but very succinctly, it's about making your lives easier so that it reduces the hurdle and the chance that things aren't going to go well when you're trying to deploy an integration in Learn. Okay. We'll talk about that a bit more in depth in a moment. I think and this relates to a Slack conversation that Terry and I had very briefly a while back. So before we launch into the deeper dive around the token bucket request and this integration deployment improvement, I hope that I don't have a slide on it, but I wanted to mention our docs.anthology work. I think that as you all have hopefully noticed, we've redone the site. We're deploying it using a different back end, which allows us to actually more easily extend it, right? And one of the and Davey, I'm more than happy to give a pause and let you chime in here. But one of the things that we're interested in doing with this new format is being able to provide language, for example, language specific code examples that are pulled directly out of GitHub, so that when we update a GitHub project that we are documenting, that code is automatically reflected in the documentation for that project. This also, as we opens up opportunity as we make those open API improvements. It opens up an opportunity for actually being able to say, oh, we are talking about a specific endpoint here. Let's pull the latest version of that into the documentation and be able to pull in sections of the Swagger document as defined by the need in, I'm overusing the word document, sorry about that, as we have the need to in the explanatory document, right? So we're using DocuSource. It's a React-based documentation delivery system, and it's really very readily extensible. Hey, Davey, would you like to add anything to that around the documentation side?
Not so much. You already said most of it, to be honest. The
Oh
only thing
man,
will be that we just changed all of the links from the site because we were having weird links in some places. So that's the only thing that I will add, but you already nailed it. So thank you, Mark.
awesome. Sorry to steal your thunder there, buddy.
It's okay. It's okay.
All right, so let's take a few minutes. I think I'm going to try to wrap this up with 15 minutes to go so we can actually have some conversation, okay? But we are changing dramatically how we handle rate limits with the APIs. All right. Right now, we utilize what's called a window model, right? Meaning you get so many requests per time. Okay. And that varies. But the problem with that model is that um, well, it's twofold. One, uh, you can inadvertently generate what is akin to a denial of service attack by just, hammering the system and consuming all of your rate limit tokens in a very short period of time. And that's problematic, right? Because well, darn, you've used up all your request limit, right? Your rate limit, but you also likely negatively impacted the your learned service, right? Causing it to slow down, etc. Okay, so what we're doing is we are refactoring this to use a token bucket model or a leaky bucket model, right? And the way this works is that you have a bucket of tokens, all right? And every time you make a request, a token is removed from that bucket. The upside is that also during a period of time, that bucket is slowly refilling, right? And so when you combine the supply of tokens, right, with the fact that that bucket is continually refilling, right, you no longer have the scenario where you run out of tokens. All right. Now, that solves the, oh my gosh, I've used up all my tokens. My application has stopped working. What do I do now? Oh, I call support and ask them to put through a rate increase ASAP. Well, we recognize that that is a chore, right? So we solved that problem with this token bucket. What we don't solve, however, is the that uh, potential burn through, right? What? So in part, right, you can delete your bucket, okay, and burn through your bucket and or your token limit, right? But it's always refilling. Let's take a look at the next slide and talk a little bit about um, like a basic scenario of how this works, right? I'm not going to really just read the slide to you, okay? This is getting recorded. You'll see it later. Be able to read it more at your leisure. But the idea is that not only does that bucket refill, but we're also able to implement a level of throttling. Okay. So when you are burning through your bucket and you've exceeded your bucket capacity, right, for a period of time, we apply throttling. Okay. Um, from the developer's perspective, right? Um, you might see you'll get back a message, right? You'll get sent an email saying, hey, wait, you've exceeded your bucket limit, right? But you'll also start to get 429s with a timestamp, right? And that timestamp is, well, here's when you can make your next request. And that's the way throttling will work in the future. And what will happen is it'll be a degrading throttle. Okay. And by that, I mean over a period of time. So if you exceed your limit briefly, yeah, nothing's going to happen really. If you exceed your limit for 2 hours, then you're going to enter this degraded throttle phase, right? And I actually have a chart here. Yeah, there's the chart. I put them in the wrong order. But basically, um, when you are going through there's throttling and then there is alerting, right? And the idea is during brief blips, right, where you might exceed your bucket capacity or your limit, right, you'll just get an alert saying, hey, look, you know, you're over consuming here. What are what are you going to do? Okay. But if you are doing that over an extended period of time, that's where you're going to get that degraded throttling. And that's represented up above here where the green line is well above the throttling threshold for an extended period. And we've gone from a minimum throttling to a maximum throttling. The application still works, right? But there is likely expected a performance decline. And the whole point of this is so that we are all good citizens in the environment. And basically, also your applications will always work. Their response time might just be slowed down a little bit. I'm sure there are going to be a lot of questions about this. Davey and I will be writing a wonderful bit of how-to, including also how to manage that those 429s, that degraded throttling. I've done it. It takes about 20 lines of code, and you can handle and manage to not have your application blow up. So basically, here's a quick flow diagram that talks about how it all works. As you can see, basically, is you have your bucket refill rate, you check whether tokens are available, and you move through. If there aren't, then we invoke that purple line that where the green part is up above, or maybe just send an alert, right? And then we check for that use. So there are these three throttles that we can apply ultimately really to protect your application as well as the learn system on which the application is installed. Okay, so very quickly, I've got 3 minutes here to go through.
Okay, Mark, I have a quick question on that.
Yeah.
On that one.
Yeah.
So that's all going to work correctly when the REST API developer takes advantage of what we've done with the leaky buckets, or the bucket of
right.
the sieve, basically. If the REST API developer hasn't taken advantage, then it would still continue to behave like it does today. Is that correct?
No, you'll not run into, you'll just unknowingly see your performance decline, right?
Got it.
Because you'll be
Okay,
ignoring
perfect.
those 429s, right? But your
Got it.
application will not feasibly just cease to run like it does today. Okay?
Beautiful.
Beautiful. Okay. So for folks who've been using the Learn products for a long time, you probably remember the days where when you'd install a B2, you'd get this nice information panel. And if it was working with the database, you'd get additional information about what it wanted to do with the database, et cetera. And that is all based on a little item that's part of the building block WAR file called a B2 manifest, all right, which all that does is describe the application and what its requirements are. So the idea is let's bring that back, okay, to integration development and as information for administrators to act on. So the idea is that especially REST applications, there would be a manifest, right? And even with LTI applications that use the REST, they would need to provide access to this manifest. And primarily what it does is provide information about the integration and its configuration requirements, right? The idea being that if that manifest contains a list of the entitlements required for the application to use our REST APIs, right, we can auto create that user for you once you accept that that's okay. All right. So the idea is, yeah, we'll do it for you automatically. If you say it's okay, if you want to go ahead and create it yourself, then you can do that, but you can't install the integration until after you've done that. Okay, so in a nutshell, it's about providing information to you as administrators, freeing you from the obligation to create those REST users and dealing with the privileges and not being told what those privileges are by vendors or integration developers, and being able to just very quickly deploy an integration to your Learn system. And I think that's my last slide. So I'm going to stop sharing and open up and see what y'all have been chatting about. Or you could just go on mic and ask questions. Happy to go that route as well. We've got 15 minutes to burn. Or you can say, oh, that was good, Mark. We want to talk about our own stuff. And we can stop the recording, Davey.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.